Welcome back to another top 10 things of Final Fantasy. Here's the top 10 aetherytes. Even though you use aetherytes all the time at this point, you've probably forgotten how they function and what their purpose is, and why we have to spend money on them. Well, I will probably talk about that in this video, or I won't. I don't remember. Number 10. The first aetheryte we're going to check out today is one in Garlemald. This one in particular is very interesting because it uses magic technology, which is based off elegant technology itself. Here in the topper, we can actually see a very similar shape to what we see in a later aetheryte that we may be looking at. What's really strange about this one is from dialogue we can see during the main story quest, there's actually multiple of these built throughout the city by the Garleans for the Garleans. Pure Garleans can actually use these teleporters, which is very strange since all the aetherytes require magic to operate. In the dialogue specifically, we see that they could use these if there was a terminal nearby. We also get revealed in that same dialogue that these aetherytes can actually function as a power source, albeit they'll lose their functionality as a teleporter in result. This probably explains why around a lot of aetherytes we see a lot of powered electricity and lamps and lights that seem to have no source for how they're charged. For some reason, this aetheryte rotates really fast. I don't know why it rotates faster than every single aetheryte in the game, but it does. Number 4486. We're going to be taking a look at the Omicron Aetheryte. Of all the aetherytes in Ultimate Pool, I found this one the most interesting. The reason this one stood out to me the most is because of its advanced technology. It seems to be almost more advanced than the ones we see the Elegant using. We have this really cool molecular geometry in the ball and stick models, which I found really fascinating. The ball and stick model is something typically used in chemistry to display three-dimensional positions of atoms and bonds. Here we also see the crystals have a pinkish white hue to them. It's something we see a lot more. Maybe it's an indication that the aetheryte source this comes from is more refined, possibly. Even more strangely thing about this one that I think leads to it being more advanced is the only aetheryte that I can recall that does not spin. I wonder if there's a functional purpose requiring aetherytes to spin, and the Omicrons themselves have figured out a way to get around this with their technology. Number 7, we're heading all the way over to the east and taking a look at Azim Steppe's aetherytes. These aetherytes share an almost exact model of the aetherytes we see in other areas in the Far East, yet they have a more rural, rustic look to them. Looking at the normal aetherytes like we see in Kojin, they are very refined red, stronger gold colors, yet the ones in the Azim Steppe have very decorative horns, more natural colors, very unpainted. Another really cool feature about these ones in particular is they appear to be weighed down by rocks, which would lean into the area of the Azim Steppe being very open. One would think it'd be very windy, so you need to secure stuff more readily. Another really cool decorative part about this is we see a Shimenawa tied to the top decorative parts of this aetheryte. This might imply that the Zayla Al-Ra tribes seem to treat the aetherytes as sacred objects. We see a lot of decorative things like these as well with other societies, such as the Kojin and the Vanu Vanu on their aetherytes. Despite having this more rustic, nomadic look to them, they seem to be quite ornate in a lot of the floating bits that we see on these as well. Kind of gives the impression that maybe these have been refined over time by the Zayla Al-Ra tribes that now occupy the area. Or maybe they even got assistance from others in Kugane. Over in Coerthas Western Highlands, we get to see a very unique aetheryte. And no, not this one, but we're actually going to look at the one over at Camp Riversmeet. This place used to be a military outpost, but was later abandoned due to the calamity. So I think what makes this one so cool is we're going to jump into a little bit of lore as to how aetherytes function post-calamity. In the post-calamity world that aetherytes occupy, we actually have to pay guild to teleport. And the reason leading into this is many aetherytes were destroyed during the calamity. To relocate them required a large sum of money, and it ended up being lent out by various business people in Ul'dah. So that begs the question, why was this aetheryte not recovered after the calamity? Was it because this area is too dangerous to retrieve it? Was the aetheryte beyond repair? Was there nothing they could salvage from it? I just find it really strange that this was never recovered. With a lot of the context between how aetherytes work, it creates this really cool visual storytelling of seeing this aetheryte here just abandoned by itself, showing that even after the calamity, not everything was able to be recovered. Even looking at this one, we can see it's been completely frozen over. As alluded to earlier, we are now at Azyz Law. This is the only, I think, known aetheryte that uses elegant technology. Couldn't find any minor aetherytes within dungeons that use Allegan technology. I did end up finding a lot of launch pads in Allegan locations. It's kind of a funny thought that a lot of the Allegans were bouncing around instead of using teleporters, but that might be a video for another day. Again, here we see the pink hue on this aetheryte crystal, though strangely these ones look very bulbous and less refined than we see on the other pinkish aetherytes, almost as if it's been forced on here, or maybe even the part of the geode this is from was very rough. Again, looking at this core, we see this very ball-like thing, similar to the Garlemald one. This aetheryte has a lot of very sharp edges to its cutting. This makes it match up with the metalwork that we see in a lot of the Allegan technology. Feels very much like a circuit board that you might see in popular media, like in Tron or something like that. Even the floating aetheryte bits that we see on this one have Allegan technology stapled onto them, almost like these circuits going through them. On the base of this one, we actually see these metal spiraling protrusions, which we'll actually end up seeing in a future aetheryte as well. The aetherytes we're going to be taking a look at today in Elpis are at the various Borneus of these islands. These aetherytes are strangely not connected to any of the major free aetherytes in the entirety of the zone. I assume this is likely just for gameplay reasons, but it's odd they make no mention of it in the lore. The various denizens refer to these as teleporters, and that's it. They just call them teleporters. These ones have a lot of stone parts on them in contrast to the major aetherytes we see in this area, which use metalwork instead, implying that these may be older aetherytes, which may explain why they aren't connected to the major aetherytes in this area. That being said, the aetheryte crystals within them are a lot more condensed and well shaped compared to the major aetherytes in this area. Another thing about these as well is they actually don't fully rotate. They oscillate back and forth, almost doing a full rotation. Maybe this is an indicator to why these ones don't have the same functionality as the larger aetherytes we see scattered throughout. Going farther over to the aetheryte we see that teleports us to the Pandemonium raids is very old and abandoned. There's moss growing all over it. This further indicates that these aetherytes might be really old. These aetherytes are also shockingly large for some reason. Like here you can see my character standing next to just the basin of one. I like these triangled out protrusions that hang. Maybe they're there to help the aetheryte find some sort of balance when it's floating above. These ones just overall though stand out quite a lot. Now to take a little swim into the Ruby Sea, here we're going to see the aetheryte at Tamamizu. This is the only aetheryte like this shape. This society aetheryte is used by the Kojins, giving it another very primal, raw look to it. Almost looks like it was ripped straight out of the geode it was taken from. A lot of this crystal has carvings directly onto it, indicating again, like we see the one in Azim Steppe, this seems to be a very sacred thing to the people. Decorated on top of this one, we have basically a coral reef living on top of this. It's very seaweed draped over it, like cloths, decorated with all sorts of various coral and things of the like. How this one was cut out is just very strange looking to me. It feels very foreign, but not in a way that we see like the standard Kugane aetherytes formed. It has a very similar feel to that of the Vanu Vanu society. Even on the basin, we can see carvings directly on the aetherytes themselves. Speaking of the Vanu Vanu, let's fly over there now to Okzundo. The thing that is weird about that is we can see in their various decorative architecture around, they have quite highly skilled craftsmen. Another one that's very decorative, very clearly sacred to the Vanu Vanu. See a lot of the Maori influence that was used when designing the Vanu Vanu. We get these intricate interweaving line patterns like you see in the tattoos of the Maori in real life. Leaning even more into the unrefined part about this is the loose crystals we see seem to be tethered to the main aetheryte, some of them trying to float away or not staying in place where they normally would. Even looking at some of the more simpler aetherytes, they all have smaller floating crystals around them. They're usually bolted in place by metalwork, but here we just see them tied, floating around quite in a silly way. I was hoping we would get some insight as to exactly where the Vanu Vanu got this, or if they've just always had this or if it was gifted to them by somebody, but given its roughness, I assume it is something they got themselves. On top, we can sort of see these straw-like toppers, probably made of some sort of flax, if it's going based off the Maori influences that the Vanu Vanu have. And if we look at their houses, we could see that they are also topped with similar decorations. Puking our way over to the aetherytes we see in Sharlayan and Thavnir. These ones, I really like the aesthetic of them, and that's really going to be the only reason I do like these ones. During the story, we get indications of the very strange technology that is tied between these two aetherytes, and that they do not require attunement of both of them to teleport between them. We see a similar technology in a lot of minor aetherytes, wink wink, but those minor aetherytes tend to be one-way teleporters. These aetherytes have really pretty textures and effects on them as you get closer to them that the player might not really notice unless you take the moment to observe them. Almost has this very marble-like texture to them, despite being crystals, which really leans into the Sharlayan visuals we get. Everything is a lot more refined than these ones. They really feel like they were grown in the lab that we see them working on them. These ones are even lacking the pink we see. Maybe because they cut them so much that they no longer have this, or wherever they source these aetheryte crystals from did not have a higher quality to them. Again, here at the basin, we see that spiral design that we've seen in a few other aetherytes as well. I'm guessing looking at this one, the purpose of it is to keep it balanced. A really weird part about the ability to teleport to these without needing attunement is you have to go through an NPC to this. Even after the story unlocks this feature, you can't directly teleport from the stone to Thavnir or from Thavnir back to Sharlayan. Maybe this is just an oversight? I don't know. I'm not on the dev team. The aetheryte in Swallow's Compass is called a Geomantic Aetheryte, directly by name. This has a lot of implications about a lot of the other teleporters we see through various dungeons, and they could be aetherytes. They just didn't call them aetherytes. This one seems to lack a crystal in entirety. If we look at the inside of it, where the glowing orb thing is, we can see a ring that's colored in the same color as an aetheryte. Maybe this is the aetheryte crystal? This could be showing that the geomancers had really good control over the elements and were able to shape the aetherytes into this very refined look. We do end up seeing a lot of the more advanced civilizations refining their aetheryte crystals quite a bit. I just love how this one looks across the board. It leans very much into the geomancy aesthetic that they're trying to establish with this place. The whole outer shell of this one is shaped similar to that of a Bagua. Very fitting symbol given its ties to the plants with various elements in Taoism. Though it doesn't have the similar markings that we would see in a Bagua, just sharing its shape, I find this fits very well with the geomancy lore. And as I indicated earlier, these minor aetherytes are one way. Now I assume the real reason for this is because it's a dungeon. They don't want you going back once you've gone forward to cheese various mechanics. Not that it really matters given how easy dungeons have become. I won't talk about that here, or we'll be here forever. I enjoy how much real-world influence this aetheryte has. I think this makes it a way more interesting design than a lot of the ones we see because of this reason. It makes you wonder if this aetheryte functions differently. Maybe the geomancers found a way to use aetherytes that does not require us to move our entire soul separately. Some sort of tie to the elements. Maybe it's breaking down our soul into various elements. Who knows? That's gonna be it for this video. Thank you for watching. Here, click video. Another top 10 right here. Down here, another video, whatever YouTube decides to put here. Subscribe. Okay, bye.